All right, I'm showing what you have marked in your report as photograph number 1. That's State's Exhibit 217. What are we seeing here?
So this would be the left side of Mr. Cooper's face, and we're looking at the 2 entrance wounds. Of note there, not only do we have the 2 entrance wounds, but we also have, if you notice, it's clear in the left edge of the left eye. You can see the stippling, those little red areas. They almost look like little red dots on the skin. Basically, that's the burn, because again, as a bullet comes out of a firearm, not only does the bullet come out, but the primer residue, because when a bullet fires, in this case, you have the primer residue as well as the propellant. And as the bullet comes out, some of that propellant's coming out, some of it's burnt and unburnt, and some of that primer, if you do have a primer in there, but basically it gives you that indication of how close the firearm is. So what we see here is Mr. Cooper, his face has been washed down, the 2 entrance wounds as well as the stippling.
Could you use your laser pointer to point out the stippling that you were referencing?
So we have the entrance wound here, and we have the entrance on the lateral side and the medial side of the face here. And I'm sorry, you can see the stippling here going on, and we can pick it up. We can see it here as we look around here. So we have what, again, stippling. That's, whether it be in this particular case where it's red, that's some of the powder as it sears the skin when it contacts the skin.
As a forensic investigator, what does that tell you, if anything, about where the gun was in relation to Mr. Cooper's face when it was fired?
Well, normally what would happen is you get a range from the medical examiner how big that cone is, because when a firearm discharges, what will happen is that propellant or that primer residue will follow the bullet, and it comes out in a conical nature or a cone. And ultimately it begins to, remember I mentioned before, gravity and air resistance, it slows it down and ultimately it falls to the ground. Well, normally what will happen is your medical examiner may, and not in all cases, either from the clothing or from the wound, get a pattern of how big that pattern is. And if you recover the firearm, you have to use the same ammunition, you have to use the same firearm caliber and make. Ideally, they use the same gun if they recover it, and what they do is test firings, usually of white cotton, at various distances to determine the barrel to distance of the firearm. But the fact that the firearm wasn't here, the best you can do is that the firearm, or at least the end of the barrel, was fairly close. And there are some textbooks that quote distances. The Mayo, for example, would give you a distance when you have this type, or at least stippling, but again, the barrel is within a distance where you get that stippling or gunshot residue.
You noted the entrance wounds. Were you aware of any exit wounds?
There were no exit wounds, sir.
Why is that important to you?
Again, if you're looking for any type of forward spatter, not only that, but if I have an entrance wound here and I have an exit wound, let's just look at that example. Well, I would anticipate I'm going to have bleeding from both this side flow as well as this side. If I only have an entrance without that exit, so here I have the exit, then essentially when I'm looking at the photos, I'm saying, okay, the only source of blood is right here. And granted, there will be some out of the nose and mouth because I have the fracture, skull fracture, so I have the associated nose and mouth, but I'm certainly not going to get anything here. So again, trying to associate what I have in the photos with the wounds that have been documented by the medical examiner.
Showing you what's been marked in your report as photograph number 2. It's State's Exhibit 218. What are we seeing here?
This is the, I believe, east side of the house, and I believe in the reports this was referred to as the front door here. If you notice, there's 2 steps leading down, and there's actually a railing that not only runs along the outer perimeter here, but it also goes across, and there's the actual gate.
This is a demonstrative that's previously been admitted as State's Exhibit number 305, which essentially is an overview of the crime scene. Would it assist your testimony to reference that as well?
Yes, sir.
Judge, with the court's permission, I would ask to once again publish State's Exhibit 305.
You may.
Yes, sir.
And we've heard some testimony previously that the door that we're seeing here is the door behind the recliner that Mr. Cooper was found in on the date of offense. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, sir.
Any further information from State's Exhibit 218?
No, sir.
State's Exhibit number 219, what are we seeing here?
In this photograph here, I'm trying to give an overall view of the scene. And again, we're looking at the door here. As I mentioned before, here's that railing, comes off the house, comes down and around, and you can see there's an actual gate right here opening. And what we have here is a piece of metal that goes across along the step itself, or just above the step. And we can see the gates open, and likewise we have this, I believe was a Michael Kors purse or a Michael Kors clutch, I'm not sure the correct term, but that happened to be a purse that was on the concrete.
And are you able to display for the jury using your pointer where that area is on State's Exhibit 305?
This is the Michael Kors?
I'm
right
sorry,
here.
just the stairway that you were referencing.
Again, the stairway here, and we can see when you go up one, they call it a stair tread. So as you go up the first stair to that stair tread, you can see the metal extending across the base of the railing. And we can see how this here, the actual gate, swings from here on that left side. And then we climb the next step, second step, third step to what I refer to as the landing.
And so we can orient ourselves with the crime scene.
Oh, sure.
On the State's Exhibit, the demonstrative there.
So here's the door right here. So here we have the recliner, and this is the door here, and this is where you'd step out and make your way, making your way down the stairs, out this way. Here we go through the door, down the stairs, and making your way that way.
Thank you. This is State's Exhibit 220, marked in your report as photograph number 4.
Mm-hmm. And so what we have here, these are referred to as placards, evidence placards. So we can see that we have number 6, 7, and 8. And what they indicate is some blood stains. This is the doorway, that front door as I refer to it, east side of the house. We have some blood stains here, some blood stains here. Likewise on the concrete stair tread, as well as that cross member. I'll use the term cross member. Here's the railing. Here are the hinges, so the gate is swinging back from, as I come down the stairs, it's going from left to right, opening.
May we approach quick?
You may. Still able to see the screen up there? Okay. Okay, I'm getting head nods, so.
And Mr. Martin, are you still able to see State's Exhibit 305?
I may have to stand at some point if you don't mind. And I can stand in the box, but.
If you need to stand up to see it, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
All right. This is marked in your report as number 5, State's Exhibit 221.
So I actually have, it's two photos in the series. One is the photo as I received it, and then the following photo, I used Photoshop to actually indicate areas of blood stains, in this particular case, on that stair tread, the first one, if I may, coming out the door right here. That's that landing. This would be the siding, the east side of the house, as one would go into the house.
State's Exhibit 222, marked as number 6 in your report, you indicated you'd used Photoshop on the previous photo to indicate some blood stains. Is that what we're seeing here?
Yes, sir.
What type of stains are these?
They appear to be drip stains. Again, remember, as I talked about before, we can see the irregular shape of the stains. This happens to be concrete. Certainly there's some small stains here. We can see the small stains. We do have an indication of how big, but again, they appear to be some type of a drip stain on the surface.
Marked in your report is number 7, State's Exhibit 223.
Yes, sir.
What are we seeing here?
Again, this is the first in the set of two. The second one, I've marked it up, but we can see the placard, evidence placard number 7, and we have an indication here of size, and we can see the various stains here, which again are circled in green in the next photograph.
I'm showing you now what's been marked in your report as number 8, State's Exhibit 224. What types of stains are these?
And again, remember I talked about the irregular surface here. Actually, they're very close together. They almost appear to be, size-wise, very small, but they appear to be drip. Well, they could almost be even a transfer, but more likely drip, because they all appear to be, irregular circular stains. But again, certainly close together. This one, irregular shaped stain. So I don't know if that's some type of contact or again, the impact at a slight angle. But again, due to the surface texture, it's tough to delineate exactly what they are.
Again, just so we're clear, where this image was taken, is it your understanding that this is on that stairway that you had referenced?
Yep, yes, sir. So we had the landing, which is number 6. This is on that first step, as one were to step down from the landing. If I were leaving the house, that would be that first step down. And again, this would be the following step, as one would be come out the door. We're at the landing for 6. Now we're moving down the first tread, and now we're down to that second area. That's that cross member, the term I'll use, cross member of that railing, where we can see some stains. And again, that surface texture, right, the concrete, we can see some irregular shaped stains. Not only that, but here we have again, I use the term footwear impression. So what we have here is what appears to be the outsole or the bottom of a shoe that's contaminated with blood. As it contacts this surface here, it leaves the impression. We don't have the shoe. One of two things. We could have a positive impression. Okay, and a positive impression would be, think about this. So here I have a shoe. Now just envision my I have this shoe, and a positive impression would be if I have the treads that are sticking down, that's contaminated. So when the tread comes down, I'm actually leaving a positive impression, if that makes sense. So in other words, if I have blood on the tread and I press it down, that's a positive impression. What you can find is what we refer to in blood stain is negative impression. Good example, let's just jump to my finger. If I were to take some blood and put it on my finger, and I were to carefully wipe it across here, the blood on the top of my ridges, because we've all looked at our fingers and we see these elevated ridges, well, I could wipe that off, and if I did leave an impression, that would be a positive impression. Likewise, what I've seen at crime scenes where someone will touch something, they leave a positive impression because they touch it sufficiently to leave blood on the surface of their ridges on, in this case here, the speaker. Well, as I move along, the blood is off the top of my ridges, but if I press down hard enough, what ends up happening is the blood, we call those the furrows, All right? So in other words, if you look at your tires, those recessed areas, those are called furrows, or on your shoe, those recessed areas. If I press down, that could literally give me what's called a negative impression. But what we do have is, whether it's a negative or positive impression, we do have what appears to be a footwear impression here on that railing, or that cross member, excuse me.
And for the record, that was State's Exhibit 225, marked in Mr. Martin's report as number 9. Showing you State's Exhibit 226, marked in your report as number 10. What are we seeing here?
Again, I've gone through, and this appears to be spatter. I've used arrows to indicate what looks like spatter. And again, spatter being something, some type of force has been applied to blood. And it could be any number of things, create these little spatter stains. Notice how they're circular in nature, and granted it's hitting the surface. Again, these appear to be some type of drip stains, but I have some very small, and again, blood wants to hold on to something. And just a quick example, if I were to wash my hands, for the most part, the water's going to come off. If I do this type of thing, that's going to create those small little stains. So when I start to get these small little stains like that, and again, what we're assuming here is all the red-brown stains in this particular case here are blood, that this type of small stain here, there was something that created that. And it could be something as simple as the shoe. Envision the shoe slapping down. It could have created, or some of that blood to come off and create that spatter. So again, size, as I mentioned before, is important, as well as the shape of the stain.
And just to be clear, you said the shoe itself could have caused that spatter where it contaminated.
Oh, it could have been on the top of the shoe. I call that the upper, just in case I use the term. The upper would be anything other than the outsole. Just another photograph here from a different view, where they've placed the placard, the evidence placard number 8.
And that's State's Exhibit 227, noted in your report as number 11. And again, what are we seeing here in State's Exhibit 228, your number 12?
As we did in the previous photograph, it's just a different angle. As I mentioned before, I just thought it was important to put the two different angles, because I'm not sure that in the previous photo we were able to capture that, or was able to illustrate that for the jury.
Thank you. Showing you what's been marked in your report, Mr. Martin, as number 13, it's State's Exhibit 229. What are we seeing there?
This is the stairway that comes down from the upper level. I believe it was referred to the sewing room of the home. I don't know if the jury can see it, but may I stand, Your Honor? May I?
You may.
Thank you. If we look here, or on the monitor here, if you look here, I've placed a green arrow in the photograph at the base of the stairs on the right hand of that riser. And in the next photograph, what we'll see is the blood stain at the base of the stairs. This is, again, to orient you as to where that stain was located.
State's Exhibit 230, your number 14, is that the blood stain you were just referencing?
Yes, sir. So, again, the evidence placard was placed by the investigators here, and what we can see is, again, we have the scale here, placard number 1, stain. Notice we have a circular stain there. So what we have, circular stain, it appears to be a drip stain at the base of the stairs. The thing that we look at, okay, so I have a drip stain here. Well, if I have a drip stain, is it isolated? This appears to be isolated because, at least from the investigative reports, and I can only work with the information that I have. So essentially, could there be some latent stains there? In other words, and let me just say that, excuse me 1 minute. Let me just say this. There are two types of blood stains. There are patent stains, P-A-T-E-N-T. Those are readily visible. There could also be latent stains there. In other words, I could have had a little bit of blood, and let's just use the example of my footwear. It comes up to a point where you don't see the blood anymore on the surface, and let's say the floor. But as I walk along, there's still trace amounts. So that's what we call a latent, because if I take a particular chemical and I treat it, it will actually make that blood stain, which is otherwise invisible, visible. So what we could have here is we obviously have a latent appears to be a drip stain. Could there have been additional stains? I didn't see any, nor were there any recorded in the report, leading to, and I use the term the living room, or where Mr. Cooper was found, nor did investigators detect anything else. So just happens to be if you want to call it a random stain with no association. Because if I did have, and let's just say I have this drip stain here, drip stain here, drip stain here, many times what we do is we follow, obviously, the drip stains. That's called a drip trail. It tells us where many times it's coming from and where it's going to. But again, this happens to be an isolated stain. It wasn't tested for blood, but at least in my opinion, it appears to be blood. And certainly it appears to be Mr. Cooper's. Could have been from a separate incident. I've certainly had cases where there are blood stains pre-existing in the house that came not only from residents there, but from a previous resident of that apartment. So again, here we have this isolated blood stain, which really doesn't have any connection through a drip trail or any other format.
And Judge, with the court's permission, it looks like 305 has been taken down. I'm going to republish that, if that's okay.
Okay.
I may have to stand, sir.
All right. Moving on to State's Exhibit number 231, marked in your report as number 15. What are we seeing here?
So this is a photograph which was taken off the body cam. It's a still frame. And essentially, as the first officer is coming into the room here, his body camera is working. And again, I have the ability to take a frame off of that. And what we have here is we have Karina Cooper here. You can see her as she's straddling. In fact, this happens to be her left leg here. And we can, may I stand, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. We can see that she's on the Mr. Cooper here. And again, one of the things that we look at, even though it's a photograph that appears to be out of focus, or again, it's a body camera, it's moving. So again, what happens is we have some motion in the camera itself. Right away, we start to look for, do I see any blood flow running down his legs? Any blood flow here? What do I see? I can see the recliner. The recliner appears to be in the back position, in that reclined. I don't know how far back it reclines, but certainly we can see that the footrest is in the up position. We can also see here the quilt, because again, what are the positions of the items in the room, the evidence in the room? So we can see that there's a quilt behind Mr. Cooper as well.
And you stated that was a still from a body cam. It's noted there as body cam Fangman, I believe.
Yes, sir. Yes, I have it marked as Fangman. Yes, sir.
And for the record, Deputy...
Sir, do you want to pull your microphone down again?
I'm sorry, Your Honor. Yes, I have it marked as, it's a photo 15 body cam Fangman.
Just for the record, Deputy Fangman's body cam was previously admitted as State's Exhibit number 102. What are you seeing of relevance to your analysis? I know you already noted that you're looking at the position of the items in the room. You're also looking for flow patterns or the lack of flow patterns on the extremities of Mr. Cooper. Anything of note with regard to the fact that Karina Cooper is on top of the decedent?
So one of the things that we have to consider, and it always comes up, has the scene been altered? It can be intentional or it can be unintentional. So we know that Mr. Cooper, certainly 911 has been called, that he's incurred an injury. We can see that Karina Cooper is on top of him. So right away when we're doing an assessment, or at least I'm looking at the photographs, because ultimately she's removed from Mr. Cooper, we have to take into consideration that there's possible movement of Mr. Cooper by Karina Cooper. Not only that, but what has she touched that could have altered? For example, I could have some, or Mr. Cooper could have some blood on his face, could be moving that blood around, which could be changing the appearance of the stain. So in my analysis, if I had a flow pattern, so flow, as we talked about before, gravity's causing it to run down, well, I could see this movement. Now I know from the body camera, and that's why it's so important that you have to look at all of the evidence, whether it be video or photographic, to be able to account for what patterns we see at the scene.
And so would you characterize Ms. Cooper's actions sitting on top of the decedent here as altering the scene?
Yes, sir.
State's exhibit number 232, again marked as a body cam, Fangman, marked in your report as number 16. What do we see here?
Again, Your Honor, may I stand, please?
You may.
Thank you. So what we do, again, we have Karina Cooper here on Mr. Cooper's lap. We can see her left arm is up by his face. And now we look at the entirety of the scene. Again, top of the recliner, we can see that there's I use the term quilt there. So in the subsequent photos or in the later photos, I want to see if the position of the quilt is as it's depicted here. Because certainly movement by her or movement in removing Mr. Cooper from the recliner could cause the actual movement of the quilt. Also, I have a better view of the room. I'm going to look at the whole room or the entire room. Here we can see this is the doorway to the outside. This is that front door I previously talked about, this being the east side of the dwelling. You can see that the door is closed. So again, was the door open and closed at the time first officers responded? At least here, the door is fully closed. Likewise, as we look in the area of this arm, the left arm of the recliner, I know from looking at the photos, because I looked at the photos prior to looking at the video, I look at the photos to determine, was there any blood staining on the arm of the chair? What is the extent of blood staining to Karina Cooper, if any? So again, even though this happens to be out of focus, again, it's due to the movement. If he were standing still, would have a clearer picture. But again, I can see the quilt here. I can see her position. I know that obviously she's placed her at least left hand on the right side of his face.
Mr. Ringel, let me go ahead and have a seat, but let me just ask, do we need this up? I mean, it does make it so he has to stand more. Is there something else we can do with that?
Judge, we could put it behind the defense table. The purpose of it is to just allow him to show, as we move forward, the different areas where the photographs were taken.
Sure, I understand. It would just, I think, make it more convenient for him, and when he stands up, the microphone doesn't catch, and anyway, so if we could move that, I think, and then also he would have a view of the screen, too.
Your Honor, well, how about it? Could we put it here where she stepped out, and this might be a, no?
I'll let Mr. Ringel and Mr. Kodiaga figure out maybe where it can go. That'll also allow Ms. Watt to get back to her original location.
Can you still see State's Exhibit 305?
Yes, sir, I can.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Ringel, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Judge. You stated that you had looked at Deputy Fangman's body camera. You said you're using software that allows you to look at approximately 30 frames per second, if I remember correctly.
Yes, sir.
Were you able to determine in looking at that footage what Ms. Cooper is doing while she's on top of Ryan Cooper?
Well, and you'd have to look at the video, but you can see that she's placing her hand across Mr. Cooper and hugging him, as well as in the actual video, you can hear her crying and commenting as well.
Were you able to determine if her face was making contact with?
Yes, sir, in the video, yes. In other words, her face was making contact with Mr. Cooper's face, almost a rubbing motion to the face, yes.
And were you able to tell if that was the left side or the right side of Mr. Cooper's face where she was making contact?
Well, at least in the portion of the video, it appeared to be the right side of the face, in one portion of the video that I specifically recall. Yes, sir.
And here it looks as though she's making contact with the left side of his face. Is that correct?
No, that would be the right side, sir. Right? His head is to her. His head is to her left. No, to her right. So his head is. It looks like her head is. This is his head back here on that side of her.
All right. So he's facing forward in the chair.
Right, so that would be the right side of his face. Her face is up against this left side here.
Okay, thank you.
I didn't touch anything.
All right, moving on to what's been marked as State's Exhibit 233, marked in your report as 17. What are we seeing here?
This is a photo which I was provided by Trent Pillaret from DCI. This was in his report. I believe it came from one of the body cameras. I'm not sure, but prior to first responders arriving on the scene, and what we see here is Karina Cooper has been removed. And again, what we're looking at here is this is probably one of the earliest photos that we see. And again, we have Mr. Cooper here in the chair. Remember I talked about flow patterns, trying to determine as to whether he may have been standing at the time, kneeling at the time. Well, first of all, as we look, we see a saturation stain, and I did mention that briefly. Saturation stain is when I have blood that's on something that's porous, such as fabric or clothing. So we can see it's making its way down because of gravity, so it's making its way down, but I don't have any flow pattern going across his stomach. Again, these blankets could have been placed after, post-event, or they could have been there prior to, which again, I don't see any blood on them. Likewise, the other thing that we want to take a look at is his left arm. And one of what we're looking for there is, do we see any evidence, the flow pattern in the shirt? Notice it comes down his sleeve, but there's still a couple of inches. Likewise, we have some blood out here, and I'll talk about that in later slides, but one of the reasons for this blood out here could have been his arm extended out here. So instead of his arm being flexed at the elbow, right here, as we see it, into his waist, if the position were out here, blood could have flowed down, because we know the wound is on that left side, could have flowed down his hand, and his fingers could have been here, which account for this, and we'll talk about that later. But from everything that we see, or I see, there's no evidence at all that he was anything other than this position. Likewise, again, what's around him, we can see that quilt. Here's the quilt behind him. We can see on the quilt that shiny area here on the, right side of his face is blood, clotted blood. We can also see over here there's some blood that's amassed here. So again, what we have is the quilt, he's up against it. There's no evidence at all of him in a position other than that reclining position. And again, generally, here's another photo to show that the door was closed at the time. We can see this large pattern here, because again, ultimately when first responders or investigators come to the scene, certainly the dynamics could have changed. You could have some flow going on that could have increased that pattern. So this gives me an idea, at least when this photo was taken, this was what the scene looked like. And again, we had Karina Cooper here. We do know that she was involved in some of the altering of the scene, whether, like I say, we don't know intentional or unintentional, but certainly that gives us an indication that, we have to consider that when we look at the case in summary.